So, lads, today we're going to be talking about the Fever versus the Dream. It's not even game two, game one. Game one of the Fever versus the Dream. And this is something that we can kind of expect to have seen. But the Fever v the Dream, game one, was the first Indiana Fever game of the playoffs this year. It was on a Sunday. Again, it clashed with the NFL. Last year, the Indiana Fever played the Connecticut Sun at this same time slot. The viewership was like 2.3 million. It was like 2.3 million people watched this game when it was the Fever versus Connecticut Sun with Caitlin Clark. And these games are on ABC. And if you guys don't know, last year's playoffs, they just didn't have the greatest viewership other than Caitlin Clark. The New York Liberty played a game. When they played the Mercury, there was an average of 400k viewers. And it was up like 10% on the same slot last year, which was the Lynx versus the Mercury. But that's only because it peaked at 700k in overtime. So the Liberty versus the Lynx peaking in overtime. Without overtime, it's not Liberty versus Lynx, Liberty versus Mercury. Without overtime, it would have had less views, the same views, if not less than last year. But the Indiana Fever had 951. They're like, it was the second most watched first round game ever on ABC. 951,000 views. Like, the non-Caitlin Clark Fever pulled in more views than that on Ion when there was still hope that Caitlin Clark was coming back. And that's one of the things that people don't realize. The death of relevancy for the Indiana Fever was not when Caitlin Clark got injured. It was when they ruled her out for the season. And you can see it. You could see it. Like, it wasn't even necessarily when they ruled her out for the season. It was like when these leagues take a break, if you don't have a reason to come back. So like last year with the Olympic break, everyone wanted to watch Caitlin Clark. So boom, the Olympic break made the league even bigger. But this year, the problem is that when Caitlin had her first injury, like, you can literally see it. The easiest way to show when people are watching the games, like whatever about viewership, you can see viewership numbers. Obviously, they started dropping every time Caitlin got injured. But you can see with engaged fans, if you look at like stream numbers from me, from Rosie, from Rachel Demita, from Venom, from everyone, in watch parties, people just trying to get along, talking about things, relevancy of what happens in these scenarios, you can see that like a lot of us were averaging 1,000 concurrents when Caitlin had that first injury, because there's still, hope the Fever are still going to hold on. Then Caitlin had the second injury, and there was still hope. There was still kind of hope after the groin injury, and people are still watching those games. They won the Commissioner's Cup, and they're still kind of on a high because, Caitlin's coming back. And then Caitlin had the third injury, and the All-Star break happened. So there's a couple of days break, and she's not playing the All-Star game, and there's a little bit less hype for the Fever. That was the first time the Fever had less hype, because even with Caitlin's first two injuries, because there was always the hope that Caitlin would come back. With the All-Star one, people were like, oh, maybe she won't. And then as time went on, it became less and less relevant because we all kind of just assumed she wasn't coming back. Well, some people assumed she wasn't coming back. And then the second it was announced that Caitlin Clark was done for the season, I'm not going to lie, relevancy to anything Indiana Fever related, relevancy to anything Caitlin Clark related, you can see it by engagements on social media. You can see it via Google Trends. You can see it. The Caitlin Clark mania died when she got ruled out for the season. And I'm not saying Caitlin Clark's popularity is going anywhere. The mania is gone. It's like Stephen Curry. The Steph Curry mania died when Kevin Durant joined the Golden State Warriors. It was no longer must-watch TV. It was no longer showing your friends about Stephen Curry. It was no longer Stephen Curry's NBA. And I'm not saying that it's no longer Caitlin Clark's WNBA, because there's no there's no one still as popular as Caitlin Clark, just like there's no one as popular as Steph Curry. But there's going to be, it's now at the stage where a year ago, people became really big WNBA fans because of Caitlin Clark, because of the stories, because of everything. They were interested in one player. And just like anything in life, like if you're interested in one player in one team, you become interested in other teams. Like, for example, Premier League. I'm a Leeds fan. I didn't know anything about what happened in the Premier League last year. And because I'm a Leeds fan, I'm watching all these other teams too. Because we're in the league, I'm watching all these other teams too, and then I have an interest in all these other teams. That's just a phenomenon in life in general. It's not necessarily a sport thing. It's just a thing in life, a thing in popular culture. And people are really interested in Caitlin Clark, so they became interested in the league. And that held through for a year and a half. And then when it just became hopeless, when Caitlin Clark's not there, the people that are interested in Caitlin Clark and became interested in other teams by default have other interests. Like if you weren't interested in the WNBA pre Caitlin Clark and Caitlin Clark brought in your interest, the reality is that there's a very good chance that when the NFL comes back or whatever you used to be interested in before WNBA, with Caitlin Clark not there, you will be interested in that instead of WNBA. And as we've seen, 951k average viewers for an Indiana Fever game on ABC is bad. It's bad. It's like down 50% on last year. It's down 50%. Like that's bad. That's really bad. And that's all I can say. Like it has dropped 50% of viewers. And the scary thing is that even though the Fever have dropped 50%, they're still the biggest team in the WNBA. A 50% drop is still the biggest. You can see why the owners do not want to give up revenue split. You can see why they don't want to give up revenue split. Because if they give up a huge revenue split and the growth is not sustainable. Like if it turns out that Caitlin Clark, these soft tissue injuries, she's an injury prone player, or if it turns out that Stephanie White gets her wish and turns Caitlin Clark into Timu Paige Bueckers and turns the Indiana Fever into the Connecticut Sun and tries to put people to sleep for a year watching this team play basketball and coaches all the risk taking out of Caitlin, if she's successful in that, this league's done. Like we can be honest. People are fans of Caitlin Clark because they're fans of watching Caitlin Clark play. They're fans of watching Caitlin Clark play basketball. People will not be fans of they'll be fans of Caitlin Clark, but like the mania is not going to, as good as all these other players have been. Like there are players in the league that are as good, if not better than Caitlin Clark. They're boring as fuck to watch, a lot of them. And the reality is Caitlin is the most exciting player because of the risk taking, because of the high speed, because of all this. And whether it be the injuries or whether it be the coach, it seems like there's a non-zero chance that the Caitlin Clark that was in Iowa, the Caitlin Clark that played in her rookie year, is never there again. That's not saying Caitlin Clark can't win an MVP, but this like helter-skelter, sprint, most best show in sports Caitlin Clark is likely gone. And I think we're seeing a lot of fans step away, and that should be a scary thing for the WNBA right now, because I stand by this. I don't think there's going to be an agreement. I think there's going to be a lockout, and a lockout kills this league anyway. Like if we're honest, the reality is that nobody is, when it comes to the attention, absolutely nobody has any God-given right to anyone's time. And a lot of the time what happens is if you stop for a year, you've gotten out of people's routine. As seen by, I used to make 2K videos as my full-time job. I've gone back to it a little bit. My views are 10% of what they were because I went out of people's routines. Heck, even with the streams, like I took 2 streams off because I went away and I missed a Lynx game, and my viewership halved because, a lot of my viewers that went to watch other people's streams realized they're not an unhinged Irish man like trying not to fall asleep at games. So anyway, yeah, that's the video. I'll see you guys.